I would like to thank you for coming out and supporting this very important meeting. I was asked to give the opening remarks on behalf of the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Traffic and Telecommunication, Mr. Ted Richardson, who is unfortunately unable to be with us this evening. As such, he has requested me to give his opening remarks on his behalf. Tonight, I will limit my remarks to a few areas, namely the past and how far we've come, the importance of statistical information, and the promotion and encouragement of your continued support. To this end, I can't proceed without reflecting on the past where we came from as an organization. I remember when I started to work with the island government in 1997 as a policy advisor at the Department of Economic Licenses. I was the only economist in that department as well as in the entire government. As an economist, and especially working as a policy advisor, our professional responsibility requires that requires us that we have information, numbers, and statistics in order to develop policies based on information that is accurate, reliable, credible, and consistent. During those days, statistical information was very limited to non-existent, and if it were available, they were usually very outdated. So I made it a concerted journey to commence the gathering of information to see what was available, to determine who has what information and whose responsibility and authority it was to gather the information, thereby creating a network to combine the various sources of information in order to get a picture of the economic developments of the island. Additionally, much of the information that was compiled that we depended was done by the former central government in Curacao with satellite offices in St. Maarten. It wasn't until 1999, when I became the head of the Department of Economic Policy and Research, that we really started to control of providing of information, statistical information, on a consistent basis to the public. In 1994, Ms. McKinney Hickinson became the section head of the research division, where she was able to sharpen her skills and prepare herself for her present function as head of the statistical department.
When it comes to economic statistics, we have a number of short-term goals. The first being, of course, to improve the understanding and the perception towards the existing business surveys that we have, and that's why we're having this session this evening. I don't think businesses realize at times that the two surveys are quite distinct and very much different. The business cycle survey basically makes it possible for us to prepare preliminary estimates of GDP every year. It captures just rough estimates of output and also includes some qualitative data such as opinions of managers and their expectations for the coming period. The National Accounts Survey, on the other hand, enables STAT to publish final national accounts figures, and this is based on the actual financial statements of enterprises. I won't go into too much detail about this because we have the other presenters giving more information about this later on. What we would like to do is increase the survey response rates. On average, over the past years, the response rates are around 60%, but we would want to increase those to 80% and above. And we also would like to maintain an up-to-date statistical business register. A solid register of businesses is at the cornerstone of our business surveys. We actually would need to have a recent indication of all enterprises that carry out economic activities on the island. At this moment, our business register is not as comprehensive as we would want it to be, and this is one of the reasons why, especially for some of the small and medium-sized companies, they will either end up in the sample selection more frequently than they desire, or companies will be completely excluded from our sample simply because we don't have sufficient information about them. On the medium term, similar to the fact that we are collecting data in a digital format for our household surveys, we would also like to transition to do the same for our business surveys, and so we seek to offer the business surveys as a web-based form in the future. We also have been receiving more and more requests for quarterly GDP estimates. In order for us to do this, we would have to implement some quarterly economic tendency surveys, or business tendency surveys as they are called. This, however, would mean that there would be an increased burden on the side of the business community. However, at the end of the day, it would enable us to provide more actual and quick indications of what the GDP is within the current year. We also would like to obtain detailed trade data via administrative means. Some of the challenges that we are faced with at the department at this moment has to do with inconsistent participation amongst businesses. We would have, for instance, businesses participating very well for 1 or 2 years, but then for whatever reason, the year after, they would stop. And usually, if you are selected in the sample, your participation is mandatory for a period of 4 years. So we are seeing where participation is inconsistent. Sometimes businesses would participate very well for the business cycle survey, and then we do not receive any information for the national account survey, for instance. Also, some businesses believe that they are targeted or we are singling them out, which is very far from the truth. Our samples are completely random. And also we have cases where, of course, a business might have a particular issue with another government department, and for that reason, they would decide that they do not want to share information with the statistical office either. We've had low response or no response in certain sub-industries. We've had requests for data, for instance, from a company, like a small body shop, asking how many of these type of businesses do we have in the economy and what is the output. However, we are not able to give this level of detail given the fact that, again, low response from companies within these sectors. It has happened as well with construction hardware companies, for example, not responding. We also had to deal with poor data quality, whereas when we look at the data received 1 year versus the next, it is not comparable. And there again, that affects the timeliness that we can report the data, because then we have to go back and verify the information that we received with the business. The turnaround that we would like to see is basically for businesses to commit to adhering to the statistical laws and regulations, given the fact that participation on all stat inquiries are mandatory via our statistics ordinance. We would like to reach to the place where businesses would include their participation in our surveys in their annual calendars, such that you would know, okay, at this time of the year, we already know stat will be knocking on our doors, and we have to have certain information ready to submit to them. We'd like businesses to remember that individual data about natural or legal persons provided to our department are used exclusively for the production of statistics and not shared with third parties in an unprocessed form. And of course, we would like businesses to voluntarily cooperate with our surveys to avoid us having to actually enact the law and issue monetary fines. The benefits of your participation, of course, help STAT to compile quality industry statistics and broader economic indicators such as GDP and real growth. Via the business cycle survey, you enable STAT to present facts about continuous developments in our business cycle and obtain more timely signals about the direction of the economy. Once you cooperate with STAT, we are in turn able to provide statistical information to support business decisions and plans, and also governmental policy planning. Okay, in this final segment of my presentation, I would like to leave you really with just a snapshot of some of the statistics that are available at this moment based on the research projects that we have carried out. And again, with better cooperation from the business community and the public on a whole, STAT will be able to provide more detailed statistics in the future. The snapshot that I will show you includes statistics on the economy, the labor market, the business cycle, population indicators, and tourism indicators. Here I will begin with the economic growth rate of St. Maarten over the past 10 years. And you can see that between the period 2004 to 2007, we had very buoyant growth on St. Maarten. In 2008 was the time when the global recession set in and growth went down to the point where we had a contraction in the economy in 2009. Since then, I can say that economic growth on St. Maarten has been pretty moderate, around 1.5%. The last two bars are showing projected GDP. It is not based on stat projections as such, but derived from projections of the macroeconomic model within our ministry, and the policy advisors there would use the historical information from stat along with industry interviews and put out their projections. So what is being projected for 2014 is 1.4% GDP growth. Here I am showing some macroeconomic indicators in terms of the nominal GDP, and as you will see, we have between 2010 and 2012 1.6 billion guilder economy in 2010 and growing to 1.76 in 2012. There is no nominal information for 2013 or 2014 as yet, and that is due to the fact that we have the National Account Survey currently taking place, and there is a time lag between the data collection period and when this information is made available. Another reason why we would appreciate timely information getting back to us from the business community. The GDP per capita in 2011 based on the population census of 2011 was close to 50,000 guilders. We had total merchandise imports ranging from 1.3 billion in 2010 to 1.7 billion in 2013, and merchandise exports ranging from 221 million guilders to 316 million guilders in 2013. The inflation rate is relatively moderate. We had our highest levels basically in 2011 and 2012 at 4.6 and 4%. However, since then, inflation has also moderated due to more stable food prices and oil prices internationally, and we're down to 2.2% in August this year. In terms of the labor market, unemployment is one of the most popular indicators. Our total unemployment rate has been declining over the past 4 to 5 years. In 2009, we had a total rate of 12.2%, and that has now dropped to 9.2% in 2013. I have highlighted the unemployment rate amongst the age group of 15 to 24, the youth, given the fact that it's always a big topic of discussion given the high double-digit employment rates that you see. But on the positive side, the youth unemployment has been declining over the past few years, down to 25.9% in 2013 from 29% in 2009. When we look at the unemployment by gender, we see that unemployment amongst females is higher than that of males. Since the slowdown of the economy in 2009, we've had improvement in the unemployment rate in the last years. In 2011 and 2013, you would see a sharp drop of the unemployment rate amongst females, and amongst males it has also decreased, but not as steep. When we look at the employed population, especially by the occupations that persons work in, we see that the majority of persons employed work as service workers and shop market sales workers at basically approximately 20%. Following that, we have persons working in elementary occupations at 12.3%, and that includes your elementary jobs such as masons and carpenters and such. Technicians and associate professionals are third in line with almost 10% of persons being employed within these types of jobs. If we look at the wage gap measured at the points in time that we have had censuses, and this shows the last 3 population censuses that we had on St. Maarten, 1992, 2001, and the latest in 2011, we see that we do have a wage gap. For every 100 guilders that a man earns in St. Maarten in 2011, a female earned the equivalent 79 guilders to that 100 guilder. So we're seeing that the males are well in front on this racetrack. The gap has been closing over the years. As we can see, in 1992, it was a male earning 100 guilders to a female earning 66. However, although the gap is closing, it is still existent. Looking at the business cycle results up to the first half of 2014, in the business cycle survey, we asked persons to rate the investment climate as either good, moderate, or bad. What we can see here is that most companies rate the investment climate as moderate. When we look at June of 2007, as I mentioned before, the period where the economy was very strong, we'll see that a small number of companies rated the economy as bad, in red at the top, versus the proportion of companies that are rating the economy as bad nowadays. If we look at the proportion of companies that actually feel that the investment climate is good, that too has decreased over the years, but has picked up between June of last year and this year. The top 3 investment obstacles faced by companies responding to the business cycle survey during the period June 2013 to June of this year, we see that shortage of financial resources keeps coming back. It's always one of the top investment obstacles, followed by poor market forecast this year and also a lower expectation of profitability. Business confidence for a period was declining in terms of the number of companies saying, yes, I do have confidence in the future. However, since, let's say 2012, we see that that has started to increase, whereas the number of companies that are saying, no, I do not have confidence, started to drop. Prior to January of 2012, companies had the option to say they had no opinion, but that was discontinued in December of 2011. Okay, go ahead. Since this department was created in 2010, just 4 years ago, we had the very fun task of counting the population of St. Maarten, not once, but twice in the last 4 years. We started, the first exercise was the population census in 2011. At that time, we found that there were 33,609 residents, persons residing on St. Maarten for 1 year or intending to reside on the island for at least 1 year. In 2014, we conducted a household listing survey where we found that there are 37,224 persons residing permanently on St. Maarten. Similar to the global trend of aging, we've also seen aging trend in our population. And here you can see the population pyramid, where the largest part of the population, as you can see, the bulk of the population is within the age groups of 40 and above. So what does the aging trend actually mean? It's saying that between the age groups of 0 to 14 years, the share of the population between the ages of 0 to 14 is decreasing, whereas the share of the elderly persons 65 and above is increasing. And here is some historical information about the evidence of aging. If we go back to 1960, around the years where the first population censuses were conducted, we would see that the elderly population was quite significant at almost 10%, shown in red. In the following years of the censuses, that had declined and went down to as low as 2.9% in 1992. However, in 2001, we had 3% of the population being 65 and over, and that has now doubled in 2014 to 6.1%. And in contrast, we can see that the ratio of the population between the ages 0 to 14 in 1960 was close to 40%, and that has decreased over the time and is now 21% in 2014. Looking at some tourism indicators, some volume indicators of overnight visitors, we see that over the period 2003 to 2013, we've had more or less stayover arrivals averaging 460,000, 470,000 passengers. We've seen growth of 2.2% last year compared to the year before. And figures up to the first half of this year are showing a growth of overall growth of 8.2%. If we look at the different source markets where our visitors are coming from, the majority of our visitors still come from North America with 63%, 22% of visitors coming from Europe, and 6% from the rest of the world. Room occupancies are showing some growth over the past 3 years. These are combined occupancy rates of hotel and timeshare occupancies, and that has increased from 63% in 2012 to 73% in 2014. If we look at the volumes in cruise arrivals, we have grown from just over 1 million cruise passengers in 2002 to 1.7 million passengers in 2013, with a near 2% increase last year. Up to the first half of this year, we have an increase of 12% in our cruise arrivals and a 10% increase in the number of vessels calling at our port up to June compared to June of 2013. Based on our tourism exit survey that we conducted last year, we have a basic profile of our overnight visitors. If we look at the total respondents by age, we can see that most persons overnighting on St. Maarten are actually over 60, that's 20% of the respondents, followed by persons ages 15 to 59 at 19% each. Most of persons visiting St. Maarten are married, 63% of them, and 28% are single. Close to 58% have an annual household income of $75,000 or more. Majority of our visitors stay at hotels, 34%, followed by 19% staying at timeshare units, and 14% reporting to stay with friends. When we look at the composition of the travel party or who persons are traveling with, 30% are traveling with themselves and their spouse, followed by 23% traveling with family and friends. Length of stay, 50% of visitors last year stayed between 4 to 7 nights on St. Maarten, while 28% stayed between 8 and 14 nights. The average daily expenditure for overnight visitors was $122.60, and if we look at that broken down by region, persons coming from Europe were the highest spenders with $141 per day expenditure. And when we look at the cruise segment, the profile of the cruise visitor, looking at these visitors by age, The majority are between the ages of 15 to 29, and well, we can say between 15 and 39, so younger than the overnight visitors. 55% of the respondents were married and 33% single. 26% of the cruise visitors had a annual household income of $100,000 and more, and 16% with an annual household income falling between $30,000 and $50,000. Most persons traveled with family and friends or with friends only. In terms of the daily expenditure for a cruise tourist, that averaged $155 last year in 2013, and the highest spenders were reported to be our Caribbean visitors. Most of the results from our department are made public via press releases, flyers, we have our Factors Statistical Magazine, and via special reports. For more information, please visit our website. It's www.stat.gov.sx.